Welcome to Comedy Centric, your place for all things comedy. Every week, we'll discuss the legends and the people who built the business, the performers, writers, behind the scenes, and stories that you have never heard. So relax, take a load off, and join us for this episode of Comedy Centric. Now, the host of your show, nationally headlining comedian, a woman with a wicked sense of humor and a killer Jersey accent, Julia Scotti.
There's an episode that I really want to spend some time with. Coast to Coast Big Mouth is in my probably my number one favorite show. And there's a moment where Mary's in the office with Alan Brady, and he's got his foot wrapped up because he sprained his ankle and all the hair pieces, but his foot falls off the phone.
Yeah.
And hits the floor, and he does this brilliant piece of business where he grabs the phone, just goes,
and that was just because it happened. That wasn't.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with people who are great comedians.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't think of the things that they will make out of something they didn't expect. That scene. What?
Go ahead. I was going to ask, was that speech written with the hair pieces?
Oh God, yes. We wrote every word of it, you know.
Beautiful
and
brilliant.
Yeah, it's I proudly say it's considered one of the 10 funniest scenes ever on television.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely,
it was really a classic. There she is, fellas, the little lady who puts you out of business. And then at one point he said, he said, what am I going to do with them? And she said, well, you might, there must be some bald, needy people.
Bald.
You hear her, girl, guys. And then he piled each of them on his head. What am I going to do with this? Hey, Alan needs a haircut. Alan, you got a crew cut. Alan. 5 toupees on.
Yeah, and the one scene where she won't say the word hair. She's trying to tell him he looks better. And he finally just explodes. It's wonderful.
Said, you look better without. I've always said you look better without your hair. You didn't have any trouble saying it on television. Yeah.
There's a joke at the end, though. There's a joke at the end about his nose being fake.
His nose.
What a great touch at the end. It was a perfect.
I tell touch. You know, you can write stuff, but you can't write stuff that is as good as the people sometimes who do it. You know, that was great. I've always been very fortunate with that. I mean, Marlo could make things work in her enthusiasm. And Jane Curtin was a great comedian, and Susan in her sincerity. I've always been lucky enough to be writing for people who made what you wrote better than it was, you know.
Well, I have a question about Marla, about the show, about that girl, which you created, but I was watching her being interviewed, and she said that Groucho Marx wanted to play the father. Is that true? Mm-hmm. That he came in an audition?
Yeah, he wanted to play her father.
What was that like?
Well, obviously he couldn't, because we didn't want anybody who was that well known. We didn't want a character, a person who was played. We wanted it to look as much as possible, just like a family.
Uh-huh.
And Lou Parker was just wonderful in it. And
old song and dance man, wasn't he?
Yeah. Danny only did one show because she wouldn't let him anywhere near it. You know, because everybody said, well, she got the show because of her father. No, she didn't. And finally, in the last show, her sister, Terry, played a nun who, I don't remember the nature of the story, but Marlo went to the church at the end of the show, and as she was walking out, Danny walked by as a priest, and he said, hello, my child. And she said, hello, Father. And
that's great.
Only
genius. Fucking genius. Like, said the F word. I'm sorry. That's genius.
We had such fun.
Oh my God. All right, I
And
got to
you
ask
talk about.
because
Let me just tell
go
you
ahead.
one great
Yeah, yeah,
nightclub
yeah.
story, because in talking about is Rocco there? I mean, there was a time when comics were only in clubs all over the country that were strip joints, and they would only come out with the comic so that the girl who took off her clothes could go get new clothes to take off, so the comic could be on, and the audience didn't care about the comics. Joey Bishop was playing a club in Steubenville, Ohio, when he was starting, and two guys came in and held up the club with guns, and they had a pillowcase, and they're walking around taking everybody's wallet, and Joey just froze, and they said, "Keep talking, kid. You're funny." And he took every joke he could ever remember and everything, and they were robbing and laughing and robbing and laughing. And then they finally, when they were finished robbing, they pulled up a chair and said, "Keep going." So he's not doing everything under the sun. And at the end, they got up and said, "You're going to be a star, kid." And they reached into the bag and threw him a watch that they had just stolen from somebody else.
Oh, that I could listen to you forever. I want to move ahead.
Well,
Oh,
there
one
was
last
a
question.
humanity. Huh? What?
One last
Go.
question about Van Dyke. I developed a little drinking game whenever I watch. I don't drink anymore, but I drink coffee. Whenever I watch a Van Dyke episode and Frank Adamo appears, so I will see Frank
Yeah.
Adamo and I will go
Oh,
Frank Adamo and drink some
yeah.
coffee.
Take
What's
it. That's funny. He
how did
was.
he
He
get?
was. He was. He was like Dick's friend, and his guy who just did everything for him. And whenever he needed anybody extra, he put in Frank Adamo.
It's great. It's a great. It's I love seeing him. Oh, there's your new drinking guy. I have one
Yeah,
last Van Dyke
and
question.
then he went with Mary, huh? What?
Yes, he did. You're right. I have one last Van Dyke question. There's an episode where Jerry Paris is seeing a psychologist, a marriage counselor named Tony Gagliardi.
Yeah,
Remember that episode? Okay, I don't know if you
yeah.
wrote that or not, but
No,
my
it was in the first
okay,
season.
my actual birth name is Gagliardi. And when I saw that as a kid, I went, "Oh my God, I've never heard my
Oh,
name on
come on.
television before."
I'm
How did
famous.
that? Well, it's an unusual name to pick. How did that? Do you know the
I have
origin of that?
I wasn't there in the first season, so I don't know. But
Okay.
somebody must have known somebody, or they just thought it was a funny name,
Well,
or for a
I
therapist.
have an uncle named Tony Gagliardi. Well, then again, what Gagliardi doesn't have an uncle named Tony Gagliardi?
Yeah.
Um,
No, I don't know the answer to that one, but you can't
okay.
sue.
No, I don't want to sue. I was honored that they picked
All
my
right.
name. All right. So, uh, where are we going to move on? How much time do you have? Are you okay with time?
Yeah.
Are you
Do I
having
have time?
fun?
I love this. Are you kidding? I
Okay. Well,
mean,
we love.
every story, everything reminds me of another moment that was during the best time of my life. I was one of the luckiest human beings alive to be part of this.
Okay, so Marlo Thomas said that she had to audition for the first version of that girl, and she didn't get the show. They wanted blondes. They looked at blondes or
I don't
something.
know. I don't know what. I don't know. I know that that show was created specifically for her.
Well, they
But
gave
what
her a
happened?
development deal. Yeah.
Yeah, Marlo was on a pilot with two other girls playing
Right.
airline stewardesses or something, which she had to audition for. And when they finished the pilot, nobody liked it, but everybody liked her. So they
Mhm.
wanted to do a show for her. And back then in 1964, 65, you couldn't do a show for a woman that she wasn't attached to a school, a church, a doctor, a father, somebody. There was no such thing as a woman who was unattached to anybody but herself. And that was what Marlowe wanted to do. And the head of the network was a guy named Ed Sherrick, a really great guy. And he said, well, what is it you want to do? And she gave him the book, Betty Friedan's book,
Mm-hmm.
and
Feminine
she
Mystique,
said,
yeah.
that's what I want to do. And so he said, do you think it could possibly work? She said, I think it's time for it. Marlo did that by herself, and then, without, it's awkward to say, but coming off the Van Dyke show, everybody wanted you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't any show that didn't want Sam and me to do. And so when she said, I think I can get Persky and Denoff to do this, they said, well, if you can get them to do it, we'll take a chance on it. So we didn't really even know Marlo that well. And she was going to go and do a play in London with Daniel Massey, who was Raymond Massey's son. Most of your audience
Okay.
probably doesn't even know who he was.
I
But
didn't know that either.
she was doing Barefoot in the Park. So she said, well, come over and see the play and see how you feel about me. And if you do it, then you'll write. It wasn't That Girl, and it wasn't anything. It was just a show about a single girl who wanted to have a life. And so we went over. God, every story has a story. First time we were in London, and we went to she checked us into the Connaught Hotel, which is one of the classic, so British, you can't stand it. I mean, it was just, but old. It was really old looking. And we had flown over the pole at night, and we were tired and everything. We got into this hotel, and we looked around and said, Jesus, I don't think, you think they have showers here or something? And we said, well, maybe we'll go. And then they had this huge staircase with the banister was about that wide, polished, great. And as we were saying that, David Niven and Rex Harrison walked down the staircase. And I said to Sam, let's give it a shot.
Well, let's stay in England for a minute.
While we were there, oh God, we were sitting there, and this little man came in with a vest, a silk vest, and black trousers, and never said a word. He must have been 80 years old. And he walked into the room, and we just watched walk through the room, and there was a clock on the mantle, and he opened the front of the clock, and he wound it 4 times, closed it, and walked out.
Yeah, that is British.
Oh,
you had another English adventure with Orson Welles.
And, but I also had one with Peter Sellers that wasn't in the book.
Oh, is that right? Well, then okay, yeah. Let's hear both of them. Tell us about Peter Sellers first.
Goldie Hawn, who we discovered.
Right.
We gave her her first job.
Wow.
And she came in to do the lead opposite a guy on a pilot we were doing. And we knew she wasn't right for that. But we knew also that you couldn't let her out of the door because she was magical. And so when she was finished with the reading, we said, well, you're not right for this part, but you're going to be her next door neighbor. And she said, well, I read the script and there wasn't a next door neighbor. And I said, there wasn't until you walked into the room.
Was this for Good Morning World?
No, for Good Morning World. And so she got that part, and George Slaughter came to the show, and we were canceled because it didn't do that well. But George Slaughter came to the show and hired her for laughing. And when Goldie had her first special, she said, I want Bill and Sam to write it. She was really very loyal, and plus we were pretty good. Anyway, she was in London. She was in London doing A Girl in My Soup with Peter Sellers. So we went over to have a meeting with her and Peter Sellers. And we flew over the pole, and we were the only people in first class. And it was a 14-hour flight. So we were the only people who had the vodka and the caviar and the champagne. And when we got when we got to London, we not that we were drunk, we were just obliterated. There was no way. And we had a meeting. We got there around 9 o'clock. We had a meeting with Peter Sellers and Goldie at 2 o'clock. And the little William Morris agent met us, and he said, I think perhaps this might help you. And he gave us this pill. And I said, well, what is that? He said, it's a Milltown. And that was one of the first of the pills. And the Milltown it was an upper and a downer.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave you a rise, and then it brought you down. And I never took pills, and Sam had a minor heart condition, so he couldn't take pills. But it's 1 o'clock, and we're going to go meet Goldie and Peter Sellers. And we've taken 11 showers and 90 cups of coffee, and we're barely alive. And Sam said, well, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to take half of the pill. He said, I'll never forget you for this. You're my hero. So now I take the pill. And in those days, you take a pill, and people would always say, you feel anything yet?
Yeah,
Is it working?
I remember those days. Yep.
Yeah, what's happening? Anyway, we go to the hotel, the Barclays she was staying at, and we go get in the elevator, go to her room, and we're waiting for Peter Sellers, and Sam is looking at me, and I'm still like this. Peter Sellers comes in, we shake hands, the pill kicks in. I do the entire show with dancing, with sketches, with singing. I did the orchestra breaks. I mean, I was unbelievable. And Sellers was just dazzled, and Goldie was thrilled, and he was going to do the show. And we walk out, and we get in the elevator, and Sam said, that was amazing. How did you do it? And I started to cry. And I don't know. And I cried for 2 hours, walking through the lobby of the hotel crying. And then Sellers, to celebrate, invites us to dinner with Goldie in this Japanese restaurant. So now we're tired again. And I said, well, we got to keep up the front. I'm going to have to take the other half of the pill.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah, so we're now in this Japanese restaurant. And Peter Sellers was going with the most amazing woman. She was the heir to the Cunard shipping line, Lady Cunard. And she was gorgeous and a bitch, and dressed in the outfit of the times, which she had thigh-high boots with laces, and a mini skirt and everything. She was dazzling. And she came in, and of course, they made her take off her boots. And she was mad at Sellers for having to go to a Japanese restaurant.
Oh, it was a Japanese restaurant. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing my darling, right out of Peter Sellers. Now, in the middle of the whole thing, the pill kicks into me, and they're having an argument, and I start to laugh. And she decides to leave, so she's trying to strap up her laces, of which there are probably 12 feet. And Sellers is doing on his hands and knees, my darling, he's trying to unlace them while she's done. Well, I'm freaking terrible. He gets his tie caught in the laces, and now she was dragging Peter Sellers by his necktie. Needless to say, he didn't do the show. No. But it was.
Oh God, that's hysterical. And Orson Welles, what was it? What was the story?
Oh, that was incredible.
But he liked you.
Well, he did, because they wanted to do The Man Who Came to Dinner, which was a famous Moss Hart show, and The only person they could, it was the Hallmark Hall of Fame, and the only person they could figure that could do it was Orson Welles, because he was that big a character. And the problem was that Orson Welles owed so much money to the IRS, that he couldn't work in America because they would grab the money before he even left the studio. So they decided they had to do it in London. So we went to London for 6 weeks. And in the process, as quickly as I can make this, he was using Upman cigars that were $10, $20, or $30 a piece. I don't remember, because the character smoked cigars, and they were like telephone poles,
Mm-hmm.
And he would use one, and then he would just put it down and leave it and get another one. And we were going through $300 worth of cigars a day, and we had 6 weeks of rehearsal. So the director, Buzz Kulick, who was a really fine director, he directed Brian's Song, which was one of the truly great first television movies. But he decided he was going to be the director who controlled Orson Welles. And that person does not exist. And wherever Orson Welles is now residing, be it heaven or hell, that person is not controlling Orson Welles. There was no such thing. So they were going to have a confrontation with Welles, and I said, let me try something. So, it's funny. There are times when you accomplish something, but it looks like you're giving in to the star, and everybody thinks you're giving in. But what's happening is you're working out what he needs, and it hasn't cost you anything. But nobody, I mean, it happened with Marlowe all the time, because Sam and Marlowe just didn't like one another. Sam was a very chauvinistic guy. And,
wow.
I mean, she loved what he wrote, but she fought with him constantly. And I worked out constantly. I was working out things where they both got what they wanted, but Sam was angry at me all the time. He says, "You're catering to her." I said, "I'm not catering to her. I'm catering to you and to her to get what you want." But like with Welles, I worked out a thing. I called the Upman Cigar Company in London, and I said, "We're doing the thing, and Orson Welles is using your cigars, and I think you'd probably be happy to know that. And we just wonder if you would be willing to supply the cigars." And they were thrilled, So they said, "Well, the guy said, well, I have to talk to the board," or whatever. He said, "So I can't do it today." I said, "Well, okay, send the cigars today and I'll pay for them." And never said a word. And then the deal worked out. And about 2 days later, Orson Welles, after the rehearsal, he called me. He had this woman, Mrs. I mean, her name was perfect. It's like Cattersby or whatever. And she was about 60 years old. And you know that she was in love with him for her whole life. And she would protect him. She would die for him. And what happened was Orson Welles was getting drunk in the afternoon, but all he was doing was drinking coffee from this urn, black coffee. And everybody said, "Oh, well, that came after." The first thing is Welles called me in, and he came out of his shower with a robe, and I mean, you couldn't outdo him for him being him. You couldn't make up stuff better than he did. And so he said, "Did you have a drink there, Bill?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, it was really good." He said, "Good?" He said, "That is 100-year-old Bushmills. If you don't understand the difference between that and the crap you've been drinking, I misunderstand who you are." At any rate, and he said, "I want you to know that I know what you did." And nobody ever said anything. And he said, "And I appreciate it." And he said, "So of all the people on this show, I trust you." And I said, "Well, thank you very much." And so when they found out about, it was about the drinking, I was the guy. "He trusts you. Go talk to him." I said, "Why should I ruin him trusting me? It's friggin' Orson Welles." I said,
Right.
I said to Miss Cattersby, okay, if he doesn't do this show, if he drinks and it falls apart, he'll never work again because this was his last shot. I said, where is it coming from? And she was in tears. She didn't want to. I said, the only way you can violate your trust with him is to not tell me because he's going to suffer for it. And she said, it's the coffee. It was the darkest red wine in the world. It was in this urn, and he was drinking coffee, coffee, coffee. Anyway, I became the person who had to sit with him and keep him engaged. So I got to spend hours with him telling me stories and laughing and just spending time with him. And one of the great stories he told me was that he had a play on Broadway and it was going broke. And Harry Cohen, who was the head of Columbia, loved and hated him. And he wanted him to do a picture, and Wells didn't do it. He was doing the play. And Wells needed money, and he put in a call to Harry V. Cohen. And he didn't get, because of the time change, he didn't get him there in the office. And he said to the lady in the box office who was there to sell tickets, she was reading a book, and he said, he said to the people, if I get a call from him wherever I am, you get me that call. So he was in the box office, and he gets the call, and Cohen said, Orson, I wouldn't bail you out again for anything in the world. You have used me enough, and I only am returning your call to tell you that I will never, ever give you another dime. And Wells said to him, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Harry, because I was going to give you my next picture. And he said, well, what picture? He said, it's very special. And he said, what do you mean? I didn't know you were doing a picture. He said, you had a new idea. He said, yeah, this is going to be the best of them all, Harry. And I'm sorry you have that attitude, but I understand you've been taken advantage of enough times. He said, wait. He said, what's the picture? And he went over to the lady's book, and he took the book and opened it up, the cover. He said, it's called The Lady from Shanghai.
Oh,
and Cohen said, then what's it about? He said, send me the 100,000 and I'll tell you. And that's the birth of the Lady from Shanghai.
The Lady of Shanghai. Oh my God.
The Lady from Shanghai, which was one of his classic movies.
Amazing. It's amazing. God. Oh
But
my
the
God.
ending, the ending is what you're really interested in, of my farewell to Orson.
The Paris trip? Is this the Paris trip or the?
Well, not the Paris trip. Was not my farewell night with him in there?
I'm trying to remember.
God.
I made
Right,
notes. I had, but let's hear it anyway.
He and Buzz Kulick really battled, because Orson Welles is a very famous director, for God's sakes. And at one point, I mean, they argued all the time. And in the final scene, Sheridan Whiteside, who he's playing, is leaving, and Orson Welles was at the door, and he said to on the loudspeaker, the director, you'd hear his voice and you could talk to him, but his voice reverberated through the whole thing. And the whole crew hated Orson because he was always getting extra treatment, and the British didn't like it and stuff. And Buzz was fighting with him, so they were on Buzz's side. And Wells said, Buzz, I'm going to do something at the door, and I'd like you to be on a tighter shot than you're planning. And in television cameras, if you don't see the monitor, you don't know what the shot looks like. And he couldn't see the monitor. But Buzz said to him, Orson, you don't know what I'm doing. He says, yes, Buzz, you're cutting me here. I want you to do it here. He just, I don't know how he knew, but he just knew. And he said, no, you know what? Do it as I want you to do it, and it'll be fine. He said, no, Buzz, I really think it'll make a difference because this is a very small moment. And he said, Orson, it's late. We got to finish. just do the damn line. And he said to Buzz Kulick, I hope you realize, Buzz, that you are talking to the director of Citizen Kane. And over the loudspeaker came a film I felt was always overrated. That,
Bam! I think that
now,
was in the book. Yeah.
and now Buzz is Orson standing there, and he said, Buzz, you keep your shot, and I hope you find someone to be in it. And he walked out of the studio. And it's now almost 12 o'clock, and British crews won't work. They just will leave you. They don't care. And he disappeared. And we're all standing there. It was just one shot, you know. And they said, Billy, you got to find him. I said, hey, you know, there's a limit to what I can do. So we found out through Mrs. whatever her name was, that he had called Prince Philip, and he wanted to have Dover Soul at the Southampton. We were shooting in Southampton. He wanted to have Dover Soul, which is where it was caught. And it was around 12 o'clock at night. So Prince Philip called the restaurant. They got him there.
Oh my God.
And I go over to him, and he's sitting down. He said, would you like the dinner? I said, no, I just want you to come back, Orson. You're going to kill yourself if you don't do this. And he said, this is so good, Billy. You sure you wouldn't want to? I said, no, you got to come back to the goddamn thing. So he finishes Dover Soul, and we come back, and he does a line that shows over. Now there's a rap party, and on the fourth floor of this stage. Now in Southampton, there is a wall that was constructed in the Roman times, a Roman wall of stone. And wherever it existed, they left it. If it was a highway, the highway went around it. If it was a building, the building moved over. Nobody screwed with the Roman wall. And right outside of the studio door, there was a whole section of it in the parking lot. So there's the rap party, and I go into his room to say goodnight to him, because I figure he ain't going to the rap party because there ain't anybody that wants him there. And he said, this has been a great experience, and I appreciate that, you know, that you stood up for me and all the times. He said, I know I can be very difficult, but I am a genius, and you have to allow that. I do. I mean, it's been an amazing experience. And so he said, well, let's go up and say goodbye to everybody. I said, Orson, you really? Oh, no, I only called him Orson after he let me, because I always called him Mr. Wells. And the woman called him Mr. Wells. She never called him. And then finally he said, call him Orson, which I always found difficult to do. And anyway, he said, no, I am the star, and I must go up and bid adieu. I said, okay, now, if you ever went into a party where you weren't wanted, where like someone cut the soundtrack, and I went up there with him, and he had a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur with boots and a cap and everything. He was grand. And so we go up, and he makes a speech, and people all wanted to kill him. And we leave, and on the way out, he says, walk with me, Billy. And he said to the driver, he said, I need to pee. He said, yes, sir. And the guy runs in the bathroom. He says, maybe on this floor. So we went down floor by floor, and there wasn't a men's room. And now we're out in the parking lot, and there is a Southampton fog, like right out of the Third Man. And there's one light in the middle of this huge parking lot. And I mean, it couldn't have been more dramatic and eerie. And every footstep is echoing in the fog. And the chauffeur says out of the fog, sir, perhaps here. And Wells goes over, and he's at the Roman wall. It's in a little corner. So he brings himself ready to pee. And he said, Billy, Orson will never forget you, and I really appreciate it. And I said, thank you very much. And I walked into the fog like the Third Man to the thunder of Orson Welles peeing. on the Roman wall. Yeah.
You need
Unbelievable.
to put this soundtrack to that.
Oh my God. And 3 years later, there was an event at the Hollywood Press or something, a big event. And I was there with my wife, and he was across the room. And I wouldn't think to go over, I didn't count on not being embarrassed. And then he saw me, and in a booming voice, and he said, "Billy, come give Orson a hug." And he had remembered. That was, I mean, you those
Yeah.
experiences are
I,
better
I,
than
I'm
the
I
money.
I got to tell you, I'm having one of those tonight with having you on the show. So you're my Orson Welles. So I get.
Wow.
I want to.
Wow, hard.
I got a question for you, and I don't know. I want
I
to talk a
probably
little
have an
bit.
answer. It'll take
You
longer.
probably do. When I read as a kid that Lots of Luck was coming on, and I saw the cast, and I saw that you were involved, and I said, "There's no way this show can miss," and it did. What?
I'll tell you why. We wrote and did the pilot, and the pilot it was originally an English show that like All in the Family was. They were bringing
Uh-huh.
English shows on, and Dom was the funny. I mean, he was just marvelous, and Beverly Sanders. The cast was extraordinary, and
Fantastic.
yeah, and the pilot was that they needed a new toilet seat. So that was already crazy. And the show was written to follow Sanford and Son. And
Okay.
Sanford and Son was a show that was raunchy and really edgy. And they wanted a show to follow it. So we wrote this show raunchy and down and dirty, you know?
Hmm.
And they saw the pilot and they said, "This show is so good. We're going to start Monday night with it." And I said, "It's not that good." I said, "You can't put this show on at 8 o'clock for a family where they're expecting something family oriented. You got to follow Sanford and Son, which has already thrown a hand grenade into the audience. And now you're coming up and cleaning up the mess you know, and that's why that show died. We had an
But
audience.
you only wrote two episodes though, right?
No, we wrote a lot
Did
of.
you write the
We did. I
pilot?
think we wrote the pilot. And I directed. That's when I started directing, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, we had about 10 shows, and they canceled it. The same thing happened to a show that we did called The Sunday Dinner, which was written to follow Disney on Sunday night for a family. And it was about an Italian family that had dinner every Sunday night. One of the sons was a priest. Ron Carey was in that show,
That
and
was the Montefuscos, wasn't it? Didn't that become
it
the
became the
Montefuscos?
Montefuscos. It was originally called the Sunday Dinner, and it was
Oh, I didn't know that.
written. Yeah, it was written to be on Sunday night. And the
Hmm.
show, we did 12 of them. Kay Ballard was in it. I mean, we had an
Yeah, sure.
amazing
Yeah,
cast. And Linda Dano was in it. And
that's
anyway,
right.
we had 10 shows written already. And in the show, they were coming home from church. One of the sons was a priest, and they would watch football. So now you got this thing about dinner on Sunday, watching football and coming home from church, and they put it on Wednesday night. Well, none of that happened.
Oh.
And the audience, thought, I think I'm missing something. So that's what killed it.
I have one last question about
Okay. I
Good
probably
Morning
have
World.
7 answers.
Well, Good
Okay.
Morning World.
Well, that unfortunately, we hired a young guy who was a wonderful actor, but he couldn't remember his lines. Joby Baker, his name was. He was adorable.
Is that right? Well, I remember him from the Van Dyke Show. He did a Van Dyke
Yeah,
episode.
and we had Ronnie Shell
Hmm.
and Goldie Hawn, and
Right.
Billy DeWolf, which is
And
a
Billy
whole
DeWolf.
other romance of my life that nobody in your audience knows about. But
Oh, I do.
one of the God, was he a classic?
Yeah, he
Anyway,
sure was.
so the rhythm of the show was thrown off because Joby had trouble learning his lines, so that there was never the momentum of the relationships. Everything was always off center. The shows were great.
They
I
were.
mean, we had
It
we had a show where Ronnie Shell was trying to be Goldie's boyfriend, and he went on a airplane trip, and he sent her. She was decided that she loved him. He cared so much about her because he had sent her the insurance he took out. And
okay.
I mean, paid $1 and sent her, and she thought it was a declaration of love and devotion. And I mean, it was hysterical. We did some
Oh,
really
that's
great stuff. Really.
yeah. I was.
Any
Those are my disappointments. Where I thought they were gonna. I really wanted them to work and stay on forever
you
too.
want
It struck me like, huh?
so was
I
embarrassing when
know.
they
Oh no, 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 no! Nothing you could do could embarrass. Make you embarrassed. Um. What did I want to? I had something else I wanted to ask you too, and I can't. Oh, I know you've spoken with love uh, for Ted Bessel.
oh my God.
Yeah. You want to tell
Teddy
us a little bit
Bessel.
about him?
Ted Bessel, who played Marlowe's boyfriend and was voted by fans the favorite boyfriend ever on television. He was brilliant. And Teddy had a publicity picture of himself that he sent out, which was the back of his head, because he was
Hmm.
usually in a shot over the shoulder with Marlowe. So in the back of his head was famous, he said. Anyway, he was funny. He was
You were
wonderful.
roommates, weren't you, for a little bit?
No, yeah, I moved in with him when I left my first marriage. I moved in with Teddy, and I wrote the first thing that I ever directed. Uh, I wrote a script for Teddy about a guy who was in therapy, and it was his appointments. That was what the show was. Nothing happened that wasn't told and recaptured in his appointments. And his psychiatrist was Tom Poston, and his
Oh
mother
my
was
God.
Joan Blondell. His mother was
Oh
Joan
my
Blondell,
God. Oh
and his
God.
father was Tom DeAndrea. And
Oh, Gillis.
they were with him wherever he went in his mind, but there you didn't see them. And his father was dressed in an overcoat and galoshes and a hat and a muffler, and his mother in a house dress with an apron, and she was mixing a bowl of something. And all the time. I mean, and they followed him everywhere. He had to identify someone from a robbery. They were there doing it. It was so good. It was
Did
so
you
good.
shoot
Broke
that?
my
Is there
heart.
a pilot?
I
Is
made
there a
it. Yeah,
pilot?
yeah. I wrote the script. No one had. I never went to a studio or anything. I just wanted to write it for Teddy. And I was having lunch with a guy at Universal, and we were sitting in a booth, and Sid Sheinberg, who was the head of Universal, was on the other side of that booth. And so this guy said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just wrote something." He said, "Well, what network?" I said, "It's not for a network." I said, "It's for an actor. I wrote it for Teddy Bessel because he's brilliant, and this is a show that will allow him to be brilliant." And he said, "Well, can I read it?" And I said, "No. Yes, you can read it for $25,000. No one paid me to write it, and you'll have to pay me to read it." So he leaned over to Sid Sheinberg and he said, "Billy wrote a script." And he said, "Well, all right, let's read it." So not only did they read it, but they were going to make it. And it was, I have to say, it was a classic thing. And It was my favorite thing I think I've ever done, and the most revealing thing, because I was writing about me, and he was the most flawed person. He was the most frightened person, and he was just a guy, you know. And when we screened it at NBC, the audience of guys, there was an African American, there were Gentile guys, there were Jewish guys, there was a mix of people. And when the screening ended, there was silence, which always scares you. And Herb, whatever, I forget his last name, he was the head of NBC. He said, "That's me." And another guy, an African American guy, said, "No, that's me." Every guy in that room said he knew who that guy was. But they said, "But we can't."
What happened?
Can't put it. It was in 1970, and you couldn't put on a show about a guy in therapy.
Don't you wish cable had been around then? Don't you wish cable had been around then?
Oh God, it was just such a wonderful. It was a great show. I loved it.
Well, if you ever feel like you want to share it with somebody,
Teddy was the best. He just was the sweet, and he died so young.
Yeah.
The sad part was the Television Academy was doing a salute to that girl on a Friday night, and I flew out from New York and stuff. And Teddy died that afternoon. He went to the hospital with an aneurysm, and they sent him home. And he died at home. He was only like in his 40s.
Sad. Yeah, I always liked him. I always enjoyed him. I feel like I'm keeping you way beyond your tolerance, and you're being polite.
No,
Okay.
I never get tired. I never.
All right,
get tired.
is Shannon still there? Shannon, do you want?
Yeah,
you want us
Shannon's here.
Hi.
She's waiting to cook my scallops. We're having scallops.
Oh, all right. Well, here's what I'm gonna ask you.
I'll come back. You know, you're going to do this another time. I mean,
I hope so. Well, this is going to be 2 parts because there's just too much good stuff on here.
Okay.
And then we'll come back for the other part. But I'm looking forward to seeing you next month out at the theater. You said you're going to come
Sag
down,
Harbor,
right?
you're going to be at the theater. Yeah.
And bring Shannon
coming.
with you. Yeah, you better come. I'll drive out there and I'll drag you down.
Are you
there.
kidding? I can't drive.
Oh, okay.
No.
Bill, if you come back,
that-
will you talk about, if you come back and when you come back, will you talk about maybe what you watch now or your opinions maybe on, you know,
Sure.
where, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
where we are in the comedy world and TV?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I got to tell you, I'm nervous about you coming to the show and watching my stand-up.
Oh,
but,
please. Are you kidding? Love comics. Love comics.
I know you
Very
do.
nice meeting you.
And we
guys.
love you.
Will
You
this
too,
actually
Bill.
be on the air, or was this in lieu of a birthday party? I mean, it was nice. I loved it. But is it actually going to be someplace?
It's a
that I can say?
podcast. It'll be on YouTube tomorrow, right, Jimmy? It's going to be on
it'll be
tomorrow.
on YouTube and Spotify.
But we're going to, like I said, we're
Spotify.
going to break it up. We're going to break it up, Bill, into a couple of episodes because it's,
All right.
you know,
Okay.
yeah.
And we'll send
lovely.
you the link whenever we
Yeah, I
have
would
it all
hope
done.
so.
Yeah.
Great.
Make sure you get it.
I have to tell you, I
Yeah.
started out tired, and I am ready to go. I mean, I could go 8 rounds with whoever is the current champ.
I know I've said this to you before, but in back of me, there's 4 rules for comedy. They are start with the truth, stay human, don't reach for ugly, and be vulnerable. And those came from an interview you gave.
That you nailed it, man. If you're not honest,
That's you. I didn't nail it.
you're not going to reach any. Huh? What?
That's your words, not mine. I
they are?
listened to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was going to say, boy, that's great. I think that's brilliant.
It is brilliant. That's because it's you.
Oh, that's really funny. Yeah, if you're not willing to be an asshole, you don't stand a chance.
You have to be an
You know?
asshole once in a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, Neil Simon wrote a thing, and he said that a comedian or a comedy person has two heads. One that is doing what you're doing, and the other one that is saying to you, "Are you kidding? Are you going to do that?" You know, and that's really what it is. And I'm sure you do the
Yeah.
same thing. You're not going to say that, are you? Yeah, I guess I am. And
Yeah,
Alan
but I
Zweibel,
felt. Oh,
you know Alan Zweibel?
I am
I
Facebook friends with him, but I would love to have him on. So if you could nudge him a
Oh,
little bit, that'd be great.
he's amazing. Alan Zweibel and an author by the name of Adriana Trigiani, who started out as my protege and I became hers.
Yeah.
She has written 20 best-selling books. I mean, she's the Italian. I mean, she's just incredible. And my energies now are involved with a thing called Visible Ink, which is a writing program at Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital, where we mentor writers, cancer patients, to tell stories, and
Wow.
we help them write. And we publish a book called Visible Ink. And then out of that book, every year, we take 15 stories and do a production of them with some of the best people on Broadway. And at any rate, I did a workshop with Alan Zweibel and Adri. It's online. I can send you the link to it.
Yeah, I'd
And
love to see it.
it's called I Cried Till I Laughed. And it's about how to find humor in tragic situations which cancer people are dealing with.
I know
So
he was so
that
terribly
program
moved.
created,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I was gonna say I know he was
Alan.
terribly sad about Gilda Radner because they were so close.
Oh yeah, Alan
Yeah.
is just amazing.
Mm.
Anyway, it was a pleasure.
Enjoy your
It was.
scallops.
Oh God,
Yeah, man,
scallops.
scallops. And then the
She's
first
sautéing
NFL
them.
game.
Oh well, then
Yeah.
go absolutely.
Saute, little
I,
tartar sauce.
okay. I got to tell you, this is a dream come true for me, and I know
Oh,
I love you. I love you to death. I just
well, thank
respect
you.
you
It's
and honor you. So thank
very,
you.
I've been a very, very fortunate person. I really have.
Well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, I guess.
Until I ran into doctors, then I wasn't so fortunate. All right, whenever.
Well, happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you
That's
very
how we're
much. You made
You're
the
gonna eat
night
cake.
before a pleasure. Oh God, yes. Take care, you guys.